Shadows of the past? Fears of the future, Hanoi's secret anxiety. Recent revelations from leaked internal military documents have cast a startling light on the strategic mindset of Vietnam's leadership, specifically within the Ministry of National Defense. Despite publicly celebrating a comprehensive strategic partnership with Washington in late 2023, secret directives drafted in August 2024 and brought to public light by the 88 Project in February 2026 reveal that Hanoi's generals are actively preparing for what they term the second U.S. invasion plan. This deep-seated suspicion seems to contradict the warm diplomatic handshakes and booming trade numbers, but it is rooted in a fundamental difference between national security and regime security. To understand why Vietnam believes the U.S. is planning an invasion, one must first distinguish between the Vietnamese nation and the Communist Party of Vietnam, CPV. While the nation benefits from U.S. trade, the party views American values as an existential threat. The leaked document explicitly identifies the U.S. as a belligerent power that utilizes freedom and democracy not as ideals, but as weapons of unconventional warfare. In the eyes of the CPV's hardliners, an invasion does not necessarily begin with Marines on the beach. It begins with ideas that undermine the party's monopoly on power. This belief is anchored in the long-standing fear of peaceful evolution, a theory maintained by Vietnamese leadership that the West seeks to topple communist regimes from within by promoting civil society, human rights, and political pluralism. The military's internal narrative suggests that the U.S. is fostering a color revolution, similar to those seen in Eastern Europe or the Yellow Revolution in the Philippines, to install a pro-American government. Consequently, they view U.S. diplomatic engagement not as friendship, but as a Trojan horse designed to infiltrate Vietnamese society and create a pretext for intervention. Geopolitically, the fear of invasion is inextricably linked to the intensifying rivalry between the United States and China. The Vietnamese military analysts argue that the U.S. is building a containment arc around China, consisting of bases and alliances in the Philippines, Japan, and South Korea. Vietnam fears that its refusal to fully join this anti-China bloc makes it a target. The internal logic is that if Hanoi deviates from the orbit of U.S. strategic interests by remaining neutral or too close to Beijing, Washington may launch a punitive military intervention to secure Vietnam's critical geography along the South China Sea. Furthermore, the why now aspect of these fears is driven by the rapid escalation of U.S. military posturing in the Indo-Pacific throughout 2024 and 2025. As the U.S. strengthened its alliances and conducted larger joint exercises in the region, Hanoi's paranoia deepened. The leaked second invasion plan was drafted in August 2024, precisely when U.S. pressure on regional partners to choose sides against China was peaking. The Vietnamese military interpreted these moves not as defensive, but as the preparatory phase of a broader aggressive strategy that could easily turn its sights on Vietnam. The invasion scenario also reflects a deep anxiety about the vulnerability of Vietnam's long coastline and its maritime disputes. The document warns that the U.S. and its allies could exploit these geographic features to launch amphibious operations. While this might seem militarily improbable to Western observers given the current diplomatic climate, to a Vietnamese general staff trained in the doctrine of people's war, the capability of the U.S. strength Navy represents a permanent, looming danger that requires constant vigilance and combat readiness, regardless of diplomatic niceties. Domestic politics within Vietnam also play a crucial role in why this narrative is being pushed now. The elevation of security-minded leaders, such as President To Lam, formerly the Minister of Public Security, has reinforced a worldview that prioritizes regime survival above all else. By maintaining the specter of a foreign invasion, the security apparatus justifies its massive budgets, its crackdowns on dissent, and its tight control over civil society. The external threat of the U.S. serves a convenient internal purpose. It legitimizes the suppression of pro-democracy activists as foreign agents of a hostile power. The timing of the public revelation of this belief, February 2026, is also significant. The leak comes just as Vietnam and the U.S. are navigating the complexities of their upgraded partnership. The exposure of these documents forces a reckoning, It shows that while the diplomats are toasting to the future, the soldiers are digging trenches for the past. It highlights a duality where Vietnam wants American capital and markets, but remains terrifyingly afraid of American influence. Moreover, the specific language in the document regarding pretexts for war suggests that Vietnam is closely watching global conflicts, such as those in Ukraine and the Middle East. They see a pattern where major powers use manufactured crises to justify intervention. The Vietnamese military fears that a fabricated human rights crisis or a staged incident in the South China Sea could serve as the casus belli for the U.S. to intervene, ostensibly to restore order or protect democracy, but in reality to seize control of Vietnam's strategic ports. The second invasion plan also speculates on the use of unconventional forms of warfare, including cyber attacks and economic coercion. This broadens the definition of invasion to include crippling sanctions or digital subversion that would paralyze the government. In an era of hybrid warfare, Vietnam believes the initial stages of this invasion are already underway. Fought not with bullets, but with algorithms, NGOs, and cultural exports that seduce the Vietnamese youth away from revolutionary ideals. Another driver for this anxiety is the reliability of U.S. leadership. The document reportedly expresses skepticism about the continuity of U.S. foreign policy, viewing American political polarization as a source of instability. A volatile U.S. administration is seen as more prone to rash military action or sudden policy shifts that could endanger Vietnam. This unpredictability fuels the need for worst-case scenario planning, leading to the formalization of defense plans against a theoretical U.S. attack. Crucially, this paranoia helps Hanoi balance its delicate relationship with Beijing. By signaling to China through its internal posture and defense doctrine that it remains vigilant against U.S. imperialism, Vietnam hopes to avoid provoking its giant northern neighbor. Preparing for a U.S. invasion is, in a twisted strategic sense, a way of reassuring Beijing that Hanoi has not defected to the American camp, thereby preventing a Chinese invasion. The belief in a planned invasion is also a psychological scar from history. The American War, as it is known in Vietnam, ended 50 years ago, but the institutional memory of the Communist Party is long. The sheer scale of destruction visited upon Vietnam during that conflict makes the idea of a second war not a theoretical exercise, but a remembered reality. For the old guard and those they train, the U.S. remains the imperialist aggressor by nature, regardless of current treaties. Ultimately, the revelation of the second U.S. invasion plan exposes the fragility of the U.S. Vietnam rapprochement. It demonstrates that the trust deficit is far wider than Washington realized. While the U.S. sees a potential ally against China, Vietnam sees a dangerous predator waiting for a moment of weakness. This disconnect means that no matter how many trade deals are signed, the guns in Hanoi are still pointed at the ghosts of 1975. In the end, Vietnam's belief in a U.S. invasion plan is a complex amalgam of regime insecurity, geopolitical hedging, and historical trauma. It is driven now by the convergence of a more assertive U.S. Indo-Pacific strategy and the internal consolidation of power by Vietnam's security hawks. The document proves that in the high-stakes game of great power competition, Vietnam is preparing not just to be a partner, but potentially once again, a battlefield.